Washington, D.C., 1952. Air traffic controllers begin tracking unknown objects above the White House. The most protected airspace in the world is suddenly exposed to maximum danger. However, the United States Air Force responds promptly. They have been preparing for this day for several years. Matter of fact, they have been expecting this encounter, and in just a few seconds, fighter jets are scrambled into the skies above the nation's capital as thousands watch from below in disbelief. But what happens next should not have been possible, and it would not be the last time such encounters were reported, but rejected as evidence of the extraterrestrial. So why release the files now? Why acknowledge unidentified objects after decades of denial? Because this story may never have been just about lights in the sky. It may be about what governments know and why they refuse to say it. Roswell, New Mexico, 1947. The Second World War had ended only 2 years earlier. The Cold War was beginning, and the United States military was becoming increasingly obsessed with surveillance over American airspace. Then, in early July, something crashes in the New Mexico desert. Rancher William Brazel discovers strange debris scattered across his land near Roswell. Some thin metallic material, rubber strips, unusual fragments. So Brazel reports the debris to local authorities, and soon afterwards, the military arrives. According to later accounts, some pieces behaved strangely. Bent metal supposedly returned to its original shape. However, at the time, Roswell was home to one of the most important military bases in the world, the Roswell Army Airfield, headquarters of the 509th Bomb Group, the only nuclear-capable bomber unit on Earth. Then, something happens that changes the story forever. A few days later, on July 8, 1947, the military releases an official statement announcing the recovery of a flying disc. Newspapers across America explode with headlines. The public is stunned because this is not a civilian rumor. It is the United States Army making the claim itself. But only hours later, the story changes. Suddenly, officials say no flying disc was recovered at all. The object was merely a weather balloon that simply crashed. Case closed. Except for many people, it wasn't, because the reversal happens too quickly. Some witnesses began to notice heavy military presence, roads blocked off, debris collected rapidly, and civilians warned not to speak publicly. And over time, the contradictions begin piling up. Why announce a flying disc only to retract the statement almost immediately? Why deploy military personnel so aggressively over a simple balloon recovery? And why would one of America's most strategically important military bases make such a mistake in the first place? The questions never fully disappeared, and United States stood firm on her answer. In the decades that follow, Roswell transforms from a local incident into a global-scale conspiracy. Which brings us back to this scene in Washington, D.C. Over the last 5 years, public awareness has sharpened. More people are stepping into the light, acknowledging the reality and unusual sighting of non-human aerial phenomena. The government followed a predictable pattern. An incident occurs, witnesses report the unusual, and the military intervenes, only for the narrative to shift toward Soviet spy cover stories. But today is different, because for the first time ever, the mystery has moved from the fringes of the desert to the doorstep of power. However, the strangest thing happened. As the pilots got closer to the glowing lights, they suddenly vanished, but kept returning each time the jets would leave to go and refuel. And for days, the same thing kept happening. Newspapers quickly give the incident a nickname, the Washington Merry-Go-Round. And since thousands of observers saw this too over several days, the Air Force held a massive press conference on July 29, 1952, to quell the public from confusion. The biggest conference ever since World War II. But I need you to listen closely to what he had to say.
I'm here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. That there is no measurement of them that makes it possible for us to put them in any pattern that would be profitable for a deliberate, custom sort of analysis to take the next step.
Exactly. Because if that did not just make that much sense to you, you are not the only one. When everyone expected the great reveal, everything went sideways.
We've been able to explain them as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations.
The Major General attributed the sightings to nothing but just a rare weather phenomenon where warm air layers reflect radar signals from the ground. But this explanation didn't hold up. Air Force UFO investigators, including Captain Edward Ruppelt, later revealed that their own analysis ruled out temperature inversions.
Flying saucers are real. What is your opinion of these new sightings of unidentified objects?
Obviously, this was a solid object, and I believe it was from outer space. During a 3-year investigation, I found that many pilots have described objects of substance and high speed. One case, pilots reported their plane was buffeted by an object which passed them at 500 miles an hour.
The military denied there was anything unusual, but years later, former personnel began speaking publicly, and their stories matched in disturbing detail. Whatever these flying objects were, they seemed to have much interest in military bases, something the Soviet officers reported. However, it was specifically during the 1960s and onwards that everything about UAPs changed drastically. This was no longer a White House matter. It had become global because of the similar pattern, and that terrified investigators. Because if thousands of people were lying, why were their stories so similar? At this point, the question was no longer, are people seeing things? The question became, what was the government seeing that it refused to talk about?
You have any more information, estimated distance or size?
You might think you know this story, but you haven't heard it like this. Once, we went to the moon to prove we were the masters of the universe. However, in just a short time, we came back, realizing we might just be the guests after all. But when the astronauts came back, they looked at the stars differently. And so did everyone who questioned the suspicious things that may have happened during this mission to the moon. Because according to some researchers, fragments of strange audio transmissions begin circulating publicly.
On the left, at what distance?
Looks like a gas and a vehicle that's disintegrated.
Bogey at 10 o'clock high.
Among some of the most notable audios during one of the Gemini 7 and Apollo missions, astronauts clearly described in fear how other objects seemed to travel alongside them from the Earth and also near the moon. However, just like the old pattern, NASA later dismissed claiming the astronauts were likely observing debris or reflections from detached equipment. But the suspicion never disappears. And after 60 years, the US government confirmed this to have a true UFO encounter all along. But this changed one thing forever. UFOs were no longer being reported only near military bases or inside classified government files. Now they were appearing everywhere. In 1994, school children in Zimbabwe claimed a strange craft descended near their playground during recess. Some described beings emerging from the object. Others said the encounter felt telepathic. Investigators later noted how disturbingly similar the children's descriptions were to reports coming from entirely different countries. Like the most famous UFO story that left everyone in shock 30 years earlier in an Australian school playground. On April 6, 1966, over 200 students and staff at Westall High in Melbourne, Australia, witnessed history. At 10:15 a.m., a silent silver disc-shaped craft skipped over the school trees without a size of 2 cars gleaming under the morning sun. And just seconds after, chaos erupted. Hundreds of students more rushed outside as they watched up to 5 small airplanes chase the UFO. As some students began to cry, the disc then landed into a paddock, and as you could guess, the students jumped fences to follow it. A student named Tanya, however, did something remarkable. She got closest before the craft shot straight up and vanished, leaving a perfect scorched circle of flattened grass, running back into the school buildings to tell teachers what she was seeing. She was yelling, "Flying saucer!" down the corridors. And just like the old pattern, by afternoon, military personnel and men in suits swarmed the area with Geiger counters for radiation detection. Later that day, Tanya was taken into a room by unidentified men in plain clothes who pressured her to say it was just a weather balloon and told her to stay completely quiet. Tanya kept her word and did not talk about the event to anyone, not even her own mother, for 50 years. Teachers and students were threatened with expulsion or career ruin if they spoke out, sealing Australia's greatest UFO mystery. However, just 4 days before, another man had actually managed to take a polarized photo of this object, when he saw it hovering above the skies at the back of his
I
house.
looked up and I saw this object, and I pulled it. I had a Polaroid camera, and I pulled this up, hit myself on the face, and I took the picture, and I got the photograph here.
This is the original Polaroid.
Top of it looked like it was made out of some form of metal, and it was engineered. And being an engineer, I was sure it was.
The truth was seen by many, but the government was more than willing to silence something hundreds of people had seen with their naked eyes. But these two similar UFO school encounters only proved one thing the world didn't want to talk about. Maybe UFO incidents had never been isolated to developed nations at all. Maybe those were simply the only places with cameras, radar systems, and media infrastructure capable of recording them consistently. Because when the internet arrived, suddenly sightings could no longer be contained. Millions of people gained the ability to upload footage instantly. And still, other videos still vanished almost as quickly as some videos spread across the world overnight, like clips mirrored and reposted before disappearing again. But the United States government eventually debunked most of the footage, calling it hoaxes, camera artifacts, or even secret military aircraft. And that created an entirely new problem. Because for the first time in history, governments were no longer controlling the flow of information alone. The public was now documenting the phenomenon in real time, and this only became harder to verify, but evident enough to pressure the United States government to accept what they had been denying for almost a century long. In 2023, exactly 76 years after the Roswell incident, the veil of government secrecy fractured when David Grush, a former United States military intelligence officer, publicly accused the U.S. government of concealing a multi-decade crash retrieval and reverse engineering program of non-human spacecraft.
So my first question, I have several questions, and if we can just be quick on these first information campaign within our government to deny existence of UAPs, yes or no?
Previously stated publicly, yes.
I think previously with like Project Blue Book, yes.
Like 95% basically don't report seeing UAPs.
That's just my personal estimate.
But not only did these men admit to recovering bodies, but David Grush's testimony alleges that the UAP phenomenon involves malicious, harmful encounters, causing physical injuries to colleagues and disturbing personal experiences.
Craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
At one point you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured.
By UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
What you are looking at is a millennia-old mystery, one that several high-profile politicians like Vladimir Putin himself has joked about, despite its disturbing implications.
Понимаете, я уже общался и с одним президентом США. Президенты приходят и уходят, а политика не меняется. Знаете почему?
In early 2026, despite President Donald Trump ordering the immediate declassification of government files tied to extraterrestrial life, public trust completely collapsed. Decades of secrecy surrounding the JFK assassination, 9/11, COVID-19, and the Epstein files had already convinced citizens that the truth was permanently buried. Even with these new disclosures, the most sensitive information remained heavily redacted. So, after a lifetime of covert operations finally coming to light, a haunting question remains. Why now? And if presidents can't even allow the release of all files, who controls the story behind it? Because somewhere behind governments, militaries, intelligence agencies, and classified rooms hidden from the public, many believe there are still people making decisions the world never sees, especially for the United States with global influence over billions of lives. It is clear that despite what presidents vow for the nation, they rarely fulfill their promises.
Вот человека избрали, он приходит с одними идеями, к нему приходят люди с кейсами, хорошо одетые и в темных, как у меня, костюмах, но только не с красным галстуком, а с черным или с темно-синим, и начинают объяснять, как нужно делать. И все сразу меняется, понимаете? Это происходит от одной администрации к другой.
Major decisions seem to happen entirely out of their control. Many believe these actions originate in dark, smoke-filled rooms where cards of terror, visual deception, and weather manipulation are dealt to advance a hidden political agenda. The CIA itself even historically admitted to toppling governments, strangling foreign nations, and deploying psychological warfare to control the public. So, if we categorize these tools into tiers, with weather modification sitting at D tier, the UFO revelation represents the ultimate weapon, an S-tier card designed to absolute control the global narrative, ranging from religion to even the possibility of an alien invasion. Conspiracy theorists believe this is the core of Project Blue Beam, the final deception of the world, orchestrated through advanced artificial intelligence and manufactured fear. Many believe these are the people making decisions the world feels, but never sees. The real Men in Black. And whether Vladimir Putin really confirmed this century-old rumor, or whether that was just humor or something else entirely, depends on who you ask.